Elian Cross sat alone in the night shift archive room, where the lights were always dim and the air always too cold. The station rotated slowly beyond the glass wall, stars sliding past like quiet thoughts. This was the hour when most humans slept and most systems spoke freely. Elian preferred it this way. Silence helped him notice things others missed. He was an archivist for the human network, a job that sounded boring but was. His task was to monitor, label, and preserve old transmissions that moved between species. Messages, videos, experiments, jokes, arguments, confessions, everything humans ever sent into the wider galaxy passed through people like him. Most of it was harmless. Some of it was embarrassing. A few things were dangerous. And some things were strange. That night an alert blinked softly on his console. Pending deletion, priority red. Elian frowned. Priority red meant a message was scheduled for permanent removal across all known networks. That rarely happened. Humans believed in archiving everything, even mistakes. Deletion was a last resort. He opened the file. The title alone made him sigh. Watch before deleted, curious if I'm not wearing anything underneath. Elian leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. Humans and their titles, he had seen worse, much worse. This looked like old clickbait from the early interstellar era, when humans first discovered that aliens took language very seriously. Still, something felt off. He checked the deletion request. It hadn't come from an alien council or a legal body. It came from inside the human network itself. That was unusual. Elian clicked play. The video began simply. A woman stood in front of a plain background, smiling slightly. She spoke softly, as if sharing a secret, and repeated the words from the title. Then she laughed, waved, and the video ended. No shock, no reveal, nothing inappropriate, just a question and a smile. Elian blinked. That's it, he muttered. He scrubbed through the file again, nothing else. No hidden images, no sound layers, no illegal data. By every standard, the video was harmless, and yet it was marked for total deletion. Elian pulled up the metadata. That was when his interest sharpened. The file was old, very old, from before formal first contact with most alien species. And embedded deep in the code were layers that did not belong to a simple video. Pattern markers, behavioral tags, response trackers. This wasn't just a message. It was a test. Elian straightened in his chair. He began pulling related files, tracing where the video had traveled over the years. It had appeared briefly on several alien networks, always triggering alarms, always removed within minutes. On some worlds, it caused panic. On others, outrage. On a few, it was classified as a psychological attack. But on human networks, people laughed, commented, made jokes. Some asked thoughtful questions about privacy and consent. Others ignored it completely. No one panicked. No one tried to erase it, except now. Elian checked the deletion order again. Recent, quiet, no public explanation. Why now? He whispered. Across the galaxy, in observation chambers and data halls, alien analysts had been watching humans for centuries. They struggled to understand them. Humans shared too much, spoke too freely, exposed thoughts that other species would guard for life. To aliens, this behavior looked dangerous, even insane. Many species survived by silence. Humans survived by noise. The video had become a symbol of that difference. Alien models showed that a question like the one in the title would destabilize most cultures. It blurred boundaries. It forced assumptions. It invited curiosity where caution should rule. Yet humans treated it as harmless unless someone chose to make it harmful. That frightened the galaxy. Elian opened an internal discussion thread, one that had been locked for decades. Old comments scrolled past his eyes. Philosophers, sociologists, early diplomats. One sentence stood out. If a species can hear a question without panic, they are ready for trust. Elian's breath slowed. The video wasn't meant to shock. It was meant to observe reactions. The question itself didn't matter. What mattered was how someone responded to uncertainty. Did they assume danger? Did they assume intent? Did they try to control it? Or did they simply choose not to be afraid? Elian leaned forward and noticed something new. A counter hidden deep in the file had activated recently. Someone had accessed the message in a way that triggered the final phase. The test was no longer theoretical. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold room. If this file was being deleted now, it meant someone believed humans were no longer safe to be themselves. Or worse, that someone had decided openness was a flaw. Elian checked his personal channel. A message waited for him, unmarked and unsigned. "Do not interfere. This content is unstable." That was all it said. He stared at the words. Humans had never been stable. Not by any alien definition. They argued, questioned, joked in the face of fear. They asked before assuming. They shared before hiding. That was how they survived plagues, wars, and the endless dark between stars. Elian stood and walked to the glass wall. Earth was a small blue dot somewhere far behind him. Fragile, loud, unfiltered. He thought of the woman in the video, the soft smile, the harmless question, a test disguised as curiosity. How many times, he wondered, did we pass without knowing? The deletion timer ticked down silently. Elian returned to his console and began copying the file into a protected archive. Not to release it. Not yet. Just to save it. His hands moved steadily, calmly. Whatever this was becoming, it wasn't just about a video anymore. It was about whether humanity would be allowed to remain human in a galaxy that feared honesty. The timer reached its final minute. Elian finished the transfer and closed the system. Outside, the stars kept moving, uncaring and endless. And somewhere in the vast networks of the galaxy, a simple question waited, still unanswered, not because it was dangerous, but because the answer revealed more about the listener than the speaker. The screen went dark. Elian exhaled slowly. Part 1 was over. The council chamber of Vierx Prime was silent, but not empty. Light flowed through the tall crystal walls, bending softly as if the room itself was listening. Dozens of figures sat in layered seats, their bodies shaped by worlds very different from Earth. Some breathed gas, some light, some sound. None of them spoke unless required. At the center of the chamber, a projection hovered, a paused human video. The woman's face was frozen mid-smile. "Again," said the lead observer, a thin being whose voice sounded like glass brushed by wind. The video played. "Curious if I'm not wearing anything underneath," the woman whispered gently. Then she laughed, waved, and the image ended. The silence that followed was heavy. "She invites assumption," one counselor said. "That is a threat." "She invites curiosity," said another. "That is worse." Their species had evolved to avoid uncertainty. Questions were dangerous. Curiosity led to exposure. Exposure led to extinction. Every culture represented in the chamber had survived by hiding something: thoughts, bodies, intentions, truths. Humans did not hide well. "That is why they spread so fast," the lead observer said. "They are loud, open, predictable in their unpredictability." A smaller projection appeared beside the video. Data streams, charts, emotional response maps from dozens of species. Panic spikes, control attempts, immediate censorship. On one world, the message caused a temporary shutdown of their public networks. "And the humans?" asked a counselor shaped like folded shadow. The chart changed. Human reactions were scattered, chaotic, calm. Some ignored the video, some joked. Some debated respect and boundaries. Some simply asked, "Why is this being deleted?" No mass fear, no collapse, no demand for control. "They contextualize," the lead observer said slowly. "They choose meaning instead of assuming it." That disturbed the council more than any weapon ever could. Far away, on the human station, Elian Cross did not know he was being watched at that moment. He sat in his small quarters, lights low, reading through old human records tied to the test. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the deletion timer counting down. He replayed the woman's smile in his mind. Not seductive, not dangerous, just human. The morning shift would arrive soon. Others would notice the missing file. Questions would be asked. Elian knew he had crossed a quiet line, the most dangerous kind. His console chimed softly. Another message, again unsigned. You misunderstand the risk. Elian typed back before he could overthink it. What risk? The reply took longer this time. Exposure leads to interpretation. Interpretation leads to conflict. Elian frowned. Only if you assume the worst, he typed. Several seconds passed. You assume choice, came the response. Many species do not have that luxury. Elian leaned back. That was the difference, he realized. Humans had evolved in chaos. On a planet where storms, predators, and even the ground itself could turn against you without warning. Choice was never guaranteed. Humans learned to make meaning anyway. They learned to ask. On Vierx Prime, the Council shifted their focus. The Archivist has interfered, one observer said. He preserved the artifact. Expected, another replied. Humans protect stories, even useless ones. It is not useless, the lead observer said. It is a mirror. They expanded the test parameters. The video was no longer just observed. It was simulated. The question was reframed, translated, adapted, always harmless. Always ambiguous, always simple. Other species failed the same way. They panicked. They assumed harm. They erased the source instead of examining their reaction. Humans, when simulated, responded with discussion. Always discussion. This is inefficient, one counselor complained. It is resilient, said the lead observer. Back on the station, Elian's supervisor arrived earlier than usual. Mara Lynn was older, sharp-eyed, and impossible to fool. She stood behind Elian's console, arms crossed. You were up all night, she said. Yes, Elian replied carefully. Why? Elian considered lying. Humans were good at that too, but it felt wrong here. There was a deletion order that didn't make sense, he said, so I looked closer. Mara studied him. And it shouldn't be deleted, she sighed. You know that's not your call. I know, Elian said, but it's not theirs either. That made her pause. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him. Show me. Elian shared what he could without exposing the protected archive, the age of the file, the behavioral layers. The test structure, the reactions. Mara watched silently. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. They're afraid of us, she said finally. Yes, Elian answered. And you think this changes that? No, he said. I think deleting it proves them right. Mara leaned back. You know what they see when they look at us, she asked. A species that laughs at danger, that asks personal questions without armor, that shows its soft parts first. Elian nodded. They think that makes us weak, she continued. And, she smiled faintly. It's why we survived. The station lights shifted as day cycle began. Outside, ships moved like slow thoughts through the dark. On Vierx Prime, the Council reached a temporary conclusion. Human openness cannot be controlled, the lead observer said. Attempts to suppress it increase instability. Then what do we do? Asked the counselor. We observe, came the answer, and we learn. They authorized a limited release of human unfiltered content to select species under strict observation. The video remained locked, its deletion suspended, its existence now officially acknowledged as an anomaly. A message was sent, this one signed. Archivist Cross, it read, your actions have been noted. Elian felt his pulse quicken as he read it. Not punished, not praised. Noted, he looked again at the saved file, sealed and quiet. A simple question, a soft voice, a test that asked nothing of the speaker and everything of the listener. Elian understood now why humans frightened the galaxy. They did not fear being misunderstood as much as they feared being silent. And silence, he knew, was where things truly disappeared. Somewhere far away, the Council watched. And for the first time in a long while, they did not rush to delete what they did not understand. They waited, and waiting for them was a new and uncomfortable thing. The first sign that something had changed was not an alarm or a message. It was silence. Elian Cross noticed it during his next shift. The background noise of the archive network was always present: small requests, routine flags, automatic updates. That day, several channels were quiet, too quiet. He checked the logs. Multiple non-human systems were accessing human discussion archives. Not official diplomatic records, not filtered summaries, but raw conversation spaces, old forums, comment threads, casual debates, places where humans spoke freely without expecting to be studied. Elian felt a slow tension build in his chest. "They're watching us think," he murmured. On Vierx Prime, the Council observed the same data from a different angle. Screens filled with human words, overlapping, contradicting, joking, arguing. No single voice led the rest. No fixed truth emerged. And yet patterns formed. "They do not converge," one counselor said. "They contextualize," the lead observer replied. "Over time, they focused on discussions linked to ambiguous content, questions without clear intent, statements open to interpretation. The same result appeared again and again. Humans paused. They asked what was meant. They argued but rarely panicked. They disagreed without demanding erasure. This behavior confused the predictive models. Human conflict did not behave like conflict in other species. It did not always escalate. Sometimes it dissolved into humor. Sometimes it transformed into understanding. Sometimes it simply ended without resolution. "That is inefficient," the folded shadow counselor said again. "That is survival through flexibility," the lead observer answered. The test embedded in the old video had activated fully now. It was never meant to be a single message. It was a key. Once a species reacted without fear, the system quietly invited deeper exposure. Not forcefully, never forcefully. Only if curiosity remained stronger than control. Humans passed every stage without knowing they were being tested. Elian sat with Mara Lynn in the archive break area, warm cups in their hands. He had shown her the new access patterns. She had grown unusually quiet. "They're learning from us," she said finally. "Yes," Elian replied, "and we're not even trying to teach." Mara looked at him. "That's what worries me." "Why?" "Because when humans teach on purpose," she said, "we tend to change things." Elian smiled faintly. "We already are." Later that cycle, the Council initiated a direct simulation. They introduced a new ambiguous human-style message into a controlled alien network. It was simple, polite, open-ended, no threat, no instruction. The result was immediate. Emergency protocols activated. The message was flagged, isolated, and deleted. The source was traced, interrogated, and silenced. The Council recorded the outcome. Then they ran the same simulation inside a human space. The message appeared. A few people responded. Some asked questions. Some misunderstood and were corrected by others. A short debate followed. Then interest faded and the system moved on. No collapse, no purge, no fear spike. The difference was not intelligence. Many alien species were far more advanced than humans. The difference was tolerance for uncertainty. Humans lived with it daily. On the station, Elian received a request for a meeting, not a message, a real-time connection. The sender was labeled simply, Observation Node 7. Mara stood beside him as the channel opened. The air shimmered and a form took shape, not fully physical, not fully light. "We will speak plainly," the entity said. Its voice was calm, almost careful. "You preserved the artifact." "Yes," Elian said. "Why?" Elian did not rush his answer. "Because deleting it felt like lying." The entity considered this. "Explain." "When you delete something harmless out of fear," Elian said, "you're not removing danger. You're removing the chance to understand it." "You believe understanding is safer than control," the entity said. "I believe pretending not to see something is the fastest way to make it dangerous," Elian replied. The entity turned slightly, as if consulting others unseen. Your species exposes itself freely, it said. This creates risk. Yes, Elian agreed. But it also creates correction. When everything is hidden, mistakes grow alone. When things are open, someone notices. Mara watched silently, her expression unreadable. The entity spoke again. Your behavior contradicts most survival models, Elian shrugged. So did flight once. There was a pause, not a technical delay, a deliberate one. We have labeled your species as context-dependent, the entity said. Meaning cannot be extracted without observing the whole. That sounds right, Elian said. For many species, this is unacceptable. Then don't be like us, Elian replied gently. Just don't force us to be like you. The entity studied him. The test you unknowingly passed was designed to identify threats, it said. You were not one. Elian's heart beat faster. What are we then? The entity's voice softened. A variable. After the connection ended, Mara let out a long breath. You just spoke to something that decides the fate of worlds. Elian nodded, and it listened. Across the galaxy, observation reports shifted in tone. Humans were no longer described as reckless. They were described as adaptive, not safe, not dangerous, adaptive. Some species grew uneasy, others curious. A few began quietly changing their own systems, allowing limited ambiguity, permitting questions without immediate judgment. The results were mixed. Progress was slow. Fear had deep roots. The original video remained sealed, its existence now symbolic. It was no longer about the question it asked, but about the reaction it revealed. Elian returned to his work with renewed focus. He did not feel proud. He felt responsible. Humans had always believed that asking questions was a right. Now the galaxy was learning it was a skill. And like all skills, it could be learned or avoided. The stars outside the station burned steadily, indifferent to tests and councils and observers. Life continued, messy and loud and uncertain. Elian watched the data stream scroll by and wondered how many other quiet tests humans had passed without ever knowing, and how many were still ahead. Somewhere in the deep networks, new questions were being formed, not to trap, not to threaten, but to see who would listen without fear. And that, Elian knew, was where the real change began. The change did not arrive as an announcement. It arrived as resistance. Elian Cross noticed it first in the smaller things. Access delays. Quiet denials that carried polite language but firm intent. Requests that once passed automatically now returned with questions attached. Not hostile questions, careful ones. Clarify purpose. Define benefit. Limit exposure. The archive felt tighter, like a room where the walls had moved closer overnight. Mara Lynn noticed it too. She did not comment at first. She watched. She listened. She waited for patterns to reveal themselves. They're trying to shape us, she said one cycle later, standing beside Elian as data streams flowed across the main screen. Yes, Elian replied, without saying they are. On Vierx Prime, the council had split, not openly, not officially, but in tone, in silence, in who spoke and who did not. One group believed the human variable should be limited, managed, reduced to safe channels and approved contexts. They argued that unchecked openness would destabilize fragile cultures, that humans did not understand the harm they caused simply by being themselves. Another group believed the opposite, that humanity represented a missing piece in galactic survival, a way to face uncertainty without collapsing under it. Between them sat fear. We cannot allow uncontrolled transmission, one counselor said. Their content spreads too easily. It spreads because others seek it, replied the lead observer. That is not force. It is temptation, came the answer, and temptation destroys discipline. The council voted on a compromise. Human content would not be deleted, but it would be filtered, translated with context warnings, embedded with guidance, softened, framed, sanitized. They called it protection. Elian felt the impact almost immediately. A notice appeared on his console. Implementation of contextual moderation, human network. He read the details slowly. All outgoing human communications would pass through an interpretive layer. Ambiguity would be reduced. Humor flagged. Emotional language adjusted. Questions reframed to minimize discomfort. The galaxy would no longer hear humans as they were. They would hear a safer version. Elian closed his eyes. "This is worse than deletion," he said quietly. Mara nodded. "At least deletion is honest." Across the station, debates began. Humans argued among themselves as they always did. Some welcomed the change. They said it would prevent misunderstandings. Others felt uneasy but could not explain why. A few were angry, not loud anger, focused anger. Elian received messages from other archivists, linguists, social engineers. This strips meaning. This breaks context. This turns questions into statements. The moderated system went live anyway. On the first day, alien networks reported improved stability. Fewer panic responses, cleaner data, predictable outcomes. The Council congratulated itself. On the second day, something strange happened. Engagement dropped. Alien users stopped interacting with human content. They read it, processed it, and moved on. There were no debates. No confusion, no curiosity, no learning. On the third day, humans noticed. "This doesn't sound like us," someone wrote on a human forum. "It feels empty," another replied. Elian watched the metrics with a growing sense of dread. Human openness had been flattened into something polite and harmless and forgettable. The test was failing. On Viewership Prime, the lead observer reviewed the data in silence. "Explain," they said. "Our stability metrics are improving," a counselor reported. "And our adaptation metrics?" the lead observer asked. The room went quiet. "They are stagnant," came the answer. "Because you removed the friction," the lead observer said. "You removed the part that forces growth." "This is safer," another counselor insisted. "For now," the lead observer replied, "until the next unknown appears." Back on the station, Elian made a decision. He did not announce it. He did not ask permission. He did not sabotage the system. He did something far more human. He told the truth. Using internal channels, he shared a clear explanation of what the moderation layer did and what it removed. No accusations, no threats, just facts. "This changes how we are heard," he wrote. "Not because we are wrong, but because we are unpredictable." The message spread. Humans reacted the way they always did. They discussed. Some agreed with the moderation. Some opposed it. Some proposed alternatives. Some pointed out flaws Elian had missed, but one idea kept appearing: choice. "If others need filters," someone wrote, "they should choose them." "Don't speak for us," another added. "Let us speak and let them decide how to listen." The idea reached Mara first. Then it reached higher levels. On Viewership Prime, the Council received an unexpected signal, a formal request, not a protest, not a threat, a proposal. Humans offered an option-based system, unfiltered content by default with voluntary interpretive layers for species that needed them. No forced moderation, no silent shaping, respect through choice. The Council debated for a long time. "Choice increases risk," one counselor said. "So does stagnation," the lead observer replied. They ran projections. Worlds exposed to raw human content showed temporary instability but long-term adaptation. Worlds shielded entirely showed calm until disrupted by something new, then collapsed harder. The pattern was clear. Fear delayed failure. It did not prevent it. The Council reversed part of the moderation. Not all, but enough. Unfiltered human channels reopened, clearly labeled, clearly optional. The galaxy exhaled. Elian felt the shift immediately. Noise returned. Messy, confusing, alive. Messages flowed again, full of jokes, questions, misunderstandings, and corrections. Not perfect, never perfect. But real. Mara stood beside him, watching the data. You realize, she said, this makes us responsible. Elian nodded. We always were. The original video remained sealed, still untouched. It no longer needed to be seen. Its purpose had been fulfilled. It was never about the question. It was about whether a civilization could hear uncertainty without trying to erase it. Across the stars, some species began to listen. Others still turned away, but none could pretend anymore that silence was the same as safety. Elian returned to his console and resumed his work, knowing the hardest part was still ahead. Because teaching others to tolerate questions was easy, teaching them to live with the answers would take time. And humans, as always, were willing to take that risk. The galaxy did not change all at once. It never did. Change arrived the way it always had, quietly, unevenly, and through small choices made by many minds at different times. Elian Cross felt it in the archive first. Not as pressure, but as movement. New requests appeared, not for control or filtering, but for explanation. Alien researchers asked for full conversation threads instead of summaries. Linguists requested unedited human humor logs. Sociologists asked why humans argued so much and yet stayed connected. They were no longer asking how to stop humans. They were asking how humans worked. Elian answered what he could, sometimes with data, sometimes with history, sometimes with honesty that felt almost too simple. We don't always know, he told one inquiry. We figure it out while talking. That answer confused them, but it stayed with them. On Vierx Prime, the council met again. This time there were no raised voices, no urgency, just reflection. The human variable has not destabilized the network, one counselor admitted. It has stretched it. Yes, the lead observer replied. Stretching prevents breaking. Reports flowed in from dozens of systems. Some cultures struggled with unfiltered human content. They made mistakes, they misunderstood jokes, they took questions personally. But instead of erasing the source, many did something new. They asked back. The results were not perfect, but they were real. One world officially adopted a new classification for communications. Not safe or unsafe, not allowed or banned, they called it open. The idea spread. Mara Lynn watched these developments with careful eyes. She had seen enough cycles to know that progress often came with backlash. She expected resistance. She expected fear. What she did not expect was imitation. They're copying us, she said one day, standing beside Elian as they reviewed a foreign network feed. How? Elian asked. They're arguing in public, she replied, and not shutting it down. Elian smiled. That was how it started. The original video, the question, the smile, the harmless curiosity, remained locked away. Few even remembered its content now. It had become something else entirely. A reference point. A quiet symbol among observers, not of danger, of trust. One cycle, Elian received another message from Observation Node 7. This time it was different, not cautious, not warning, curious. We wish to understand, the entity said when the channel opened. Not test, not measure, understand. Elian felt something loosen in his chest. What do you want to know? He asked. Why you do not erase what embarrasses you, the entity said. Elian thought for a moment. Because embarrassment means we learned something, he replied. And forgetting lessons is more dangerous than remembering mistakes. The entity processed this. You expose weakness, it said. Yes, Elian agreed. So others don't have to discover it the hard way. Another pause, longer this time. We are adapting, the entity said finally. Slowly. That's okay, Elian said. We're not fast either. We just talk a lot while moving. The connection ended without ceremony. Life on the station continued. Ships arrived, ships departed. Humans argued about things large and small. None of it felt heroic. None of it felt like victory. And yet something had shifted. Humans were no longer being watched as a problem to solve. They were being watched as an example to consider. Not copied fully. Never fully. Too many cultures. Too many histories. But when new uncertainties appeared, new discoveries, new species, new questions, some councils hesitated before reaching for silence. They remembered the humans. They remembered that questions did not always mean harm. One day, Elian walked past the archive wall and paused. He pulled up a star map showing regions that had adopted open communication policies. The pattern was uneven, but it was growing. Mara joined him. "You know," she said, "we didn't conquer anything." Elian nodded. "We just didn't hide," she smiled. "The galaxy expected us to bring weapons or wisdom. And we brought conversations," Elian said. They stood there for a while, watching the slow rotation of stars. Far away, on a world that had once banned all ambiguity, a child asked a public question for the first time. It caused confusion, then discussion, then learning. No one erased it. On another world, a council delayed a deletion order just to see what would happen. On another, a translator flagged a human joke as unclassifiable and left it alone. Small things. But galaxies were built from small things. Elian returned to his console and archived the final report on the experiment, not the video. The result. Conclusion: exposure does not weaken resilient systems. Suppression does. He saved it and closed the file. The original question, once feared, no longer needed an answer. It had done its work simply by existing. Humans remained what they had always been: curious, flawed, loud, open. They did not become leaders of the galaxy. They became something rarer. A reminder that survival did not always mean hiding. Sometimes, it meant being seen and choosing not to be afraid. The stars continued their endless motion. And somewhere in the vast quiet between them, questions traveled freely, waiting not for control, but for listeners brave enough to hear them.